Oda has just changed One Piece forever, because after literal decades, we're finally learning the truth about the Void Century and what actually took place during those forbidden 100 years. And really, with every single word that Vegapunk is saying, our understanding of what actually happened during this Void Century is getting even wilder than we could ever imagine. For example, just on chapter 1115 alone, we now really have to question if Joy Boy was even a good guy who actually fought for his friends, or if he was more of a chaotic force that actually caused the destruction of the world. And to make things even crazier, I'm now also wondering if Imo is actually the one who tried saving the world 800 years ago instead. There's just so much to speculate there, and to actually wrap our minds around all of this insane information, let's quickly summarize everything that we have learned for a fact since Vegapunk's broadcast began. Because starting back in chapter 1113, Vegapunk dropped a true bombshell by stating that the current One Piece world is going to sink into the ocean. And that alone already kicked off a ton of speculation, revisiting old theories about the One Piece world being flooded, which was then actually confirmed in chapter 1115. But then Vegapunk's broadcast really got spicy in the next chapter, when Vegapunk also confirmed a few things about the mysterious and maybe most important character in One Piece after Luffy, Joy Boy. First, he essentially confirmed that Joy Boy and the mythical sun god Nika were two very different people living in two different eras. And that Joy Boy didn't found, but was actually born into the ancient kingdom during the Void Century. But probably the most interesting line from that entire chapter was that Joy Boy was considered the first pirate ever, and we still don't exactly know what that actually means, but based on the current chapter, we have a lot more information to picture what Joy Boy's tragic life might have actually been like. Because now, to continue from chapter 1115, Vegapunk unloaded the full barrel of Void Century lore by telling us a ton of facts of new information that both clarify some mysteries, while of course, in typical Oda fashion, also bringing up so many more questions. First off, he confirmed that Joy Boy and the allied 20 kingdoms, who would then later become the world government that we know, were in fact enemies in the Great War of the Void Century. And while to be fair, we all pretty much assumed this, it was never actually officially confirmed until now, which is kind of crazy. In fact, this war only ended with Joy Boy's defeat, which occurred at the end of the 100 years of erased history. But of course, that is way from being all that Vegapunk actually revealed in this chapter though, because he also said that the 20 kingdoms joined together because it was literally the only way to even have a chance to fight the unimaginable strength of Joy Boy's group. Which just is so cool, and we will of course talk more about where Joy Boy's strength came from in just a minute, but then for the first time ever also, we actually see a panel of Joy Boy himself. Finally, like, I'm literally shaking over here reading it. I mean, of course, Oda, being the tease that he is, as always, kept Joy Boy in a silhouette, but even seeing this panel here already gives us some true hint of what this legendary figure was actually like. For one, clearly he has already awakened the Nika powers here, just like Luffy, and from this panel it doesn't appear that he's a giant, as some people might have speculated after the Elbaf revelation. He could still be a buccaneer possibly, so I do wonder if actually, hold on, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. There are just so many things to talk about from this chapter, and I promise I will dive headfirst down that rabbit hole in just a moment, but even I couldn't believe that Vegapunk's reveals just kept coming in this chapter, because as if all of this info about Joy Boy wasn't enough already, the genius scientist also revealed that the seas rose a staggering 200 meters since the Void Century. Now, just for some context here, in our world, Tokyo, where I live, is an average of 40 meters above the sea level, and New York, for example, is just 10 meters above sea level. So seeing the oceans rise 200 meters, that would wipe out basically a massive part of the world as we know it. Like, I would be underwater basically. And to top it all off, we then learned that the incredible power of the ancient weapons and technology of the Void Century century was very likely what caused this massive flood to begin with. And of course, as we all figured, this catastrophe all happened as a direct result of the ancient war during the Void Century, which we'll discuss more again also in just a moment. But seriously, this chapter is likely the single most lore-heavy one in maybe the entire story so far. It's truly lore piece at its finest, which is my favorite version of One Piece, and I'm absolutely 100% here for more. That's not all though, of course, because Vegapunk then also confirmed that before the Great Flood, the One Piece world had not just one, but many vast continents that people used to live on. That's right, many, plural, which is kind of important because previously we thought that there might have just been one supercontinent, you know, Pangea. All that's left today though are just the remaining fragments, basically the tips of the mountains of these former continents. But perhaps the most interesting part of this chapter to me is that Vegapunk doesn't know what actually started the war in the first place, and he only described it as a clash of two ideologies. Which means there may not even have been a clear good or bad side here to begin with, which is kind of crazy, but let's actually break this down because I feel like this might be one of the most important things to understand the end of Luffy's journey at some point in the story, because if we assume that Joy Boy is anything like Luffy, I mean, he has all the characteristics, then he was most likely a freedom-loving person who just wanted to adventure, aka the first pirate. And if that is the ideology that he represented, being free as a pirate, then I can absolutely see how his setting off and becoming the first pirate could encourage others to follow in his footsteps and become pirates as well, just like how Roger started the great age of piracy in the modern era. And of course, if absolute freedom and adventure and not following rules represents the one side of the Great War, then the most logical opposite of this would be strict law and order. We see this in the current story with the idea of freedom and adventure, represented by the Straw Hats, whereas the world government and the Marines in particular represent more of law and order and a strict structure and safety net to the world. And this clash of ideals would actually fit in really nicely with the fact that Vegapunk can't quite say which side was actually right in the end. I mean, clearly there are true benefits and downsides to pure freedom and the chaos that comes with it inevitably. On the other hand, too much order and too much regulation can be a little bit bad as well, kind of like we see with the current world governments. And of course, freedom versus security is a question that is often asked in our modern world as well. And whether you like it or not, at some point Oda is just gonna have to straight out state what type of political system he actually prefers, because that's the one that's probably gonna survive at the end of the story. Though to be fair, that's not the only option, because speaking of clashing ideologies, I want to remind you of the earliest version of One Piece that Oda published, the one-shot Romance Dawn. Now, in case you don't know, in this alternate version of One Piece, this precursor to the actual story, Oda introduced the two concepts of Peace Main pirates and Morganeers. Basically, with Peace Mains being pirates who seek adventure and freedom, and while Morganeers are more your classic cruel and thieving pirates breaking the law. And while Joy Boy would most likely have been a Peace Main, I'm not too sure how the Ancient Kingdom would represent the Morganeers. Which actually brings me to another point we still need to answer, because for the longest time, most One Piece fans just assumed that Joy Boy was the leader of the Ancient Kingdom, kind of being a synonym for each other. But now that we know that he was just born in the Ancient Kingdom and then became the first pirate, we now kind of have to ask, did he even represent the Ancient Kingdom in this Great War to begin with against the 20 Kings? Or was he a separate entity from both of them? And at the same time, were the other 20 kings part of the Great Ancient Kingdom, or were they all separate kingdoms, kind of like the Ancient Kingdom being a 21st kingdom? So many questions here, so let's get back to something that we can actually see, and that is that in chapter 1115, Joy Boy does not appear to be a giant as far as we can tell. Now, there have been questions about what race Joy Boy might actually have been because of the legends of Nika tied to Elbaf, but from this one panel, he really doesn't seem like he's giant-sized. Of course, we can only trust a silhouette that Oda draws so much, and he has been known to change the shape of characters quite a lot, actually. I mean, look at the first silhouette of Kaido, and then Kaido here, or the silhouette that we got for the 7 Warlords, and then how they actually turned out. But I still like to think that from this picture alone, we can probably cross cross him being a giant off the list. That doesn't mean though he couldn't be a buccaneer or just a normal sized human, so there are still quite a lot of questions left about his true lineage. However, now before we dive into the truly juicy part of theorizing here, I do want to bring your attention to this line right here, because when Vegapunk says that this great war is still going on to this day and the ancient weapons are just waiting to be used again, it's kind of got my brain going full conspiracy theory mode here. Like, for example, we do know that Luffy can likely use the ancient weapons because, well, he awakened the Nika powers, but what if there was actually another group of people who have known the truth about the Void Century all along and have been fighting this great ongoing war for the last 800 years? Like, I know it sounds crazy that there would be a whole group of people fighting the government we don't know about, but remember that we do know that somehow the Iron Giant, for example, woke up 200 years ago and went on a rampage to try and destroy Marijua, which, if you ask me, certainly seems like it was trying to continue that very war. But how did it wake up? I mean, we don't think, at least, that anyone has awakened the Nika fruit back then. As far as we know, the last time was during the Void Century with Joy Boy, so was it some other group that found some other way to power this Iron Giant? And was there an army of Iron Giants that went to battle in the distant past? Like, we're not sure, but don't be surprised if we eventually meet a sort of hidden people we didn't know about who know the true history and have been fighting all this time. Like, I don't know, just spitballing here, for example, maybe King is not actually the last Lunarian. Like, he had to come from somewhere. He has to have parents, so maybe Lunarians have been fighting this war for who knows. Clearly though, we still have much to learn about the past and about the ancient weapons, but one thing you may have never known about them is that it is very likely that the ancient weapons could be far, far older than the Void Century and the ancient kingdom itself. And the key detail here once again lies in the Japanese and the English translation, because in Japanese the actual phrase for the ancient kingdom actually is Kyodai Okoku, which literally just means the gigantic kingdom, whereas the phrase for the ancient weapons is Kodai, which literally means ancient. And I can kind of see how that mistake happened. Kyodai Okoku, Kodai Heiki. I mean, it sounds similar, but it's not the same. And so, at least in Japanese, Oda clearly made those two terms very different, which leads me to believe that the ancient weapons have been around way longer than the Void Century even. Possibly even as far back as during the time of the actual Sun God Nika, which would explain why you need his powers to actually awaken them. But of course, the million-dollar question remains, what actually are all three ancient weapons, and how did 3 of those alone cause the 200-meter rise in sea levels? I mean, even after all this time, we still don't have clear answers, but let's look at all the new information we have and discuss all that we can get out of it together here. Because first of all, we can reasonably assume, I think, that the giant flying weapon that Imu used to destroy Lulusia might very well, of course, be the ancient weapon Uranus. And by using this weapon, we later saw that the sea levels did actually rise exactly 1 meter, so this is the most likely candidate for how the sea levels rose in the past as well. Like, it could just be that this weapon was used over and over and over again during the Great War, like 200 times, which eventually caused the sea to rise to where it is today, basically destroying a lot of the continents out there. But then again, from Vegapunk's message, if we take him at his word, it does seem that not just Uranus, but all 3 weapons played a crucial part in the sea levels rising. So let's look at the other 2 as well. Now, we obviously know that the ancient weapon Poseidon is the mermaid princess Shirahoshi, or at least she is an important part of it. And remember that she has the power to control the massive sea kings. However, that doesn't really give us a major clue about how this ability would be able to make the sea levels rise. And next up, we have Pluton, which is said to be somehow trapped within the borders of Wano. And it's actually here with this ancient weapon in particular that I want to spend a little bit more time trying to analyze the exact words used to describe this weapon. Because back during the Wano arc in chapter 1055, the former shogun of Wano, Kozuki Sukiyaki, describes what he knows about the ancient weapon Pluton himself. He says that deep under Mount Fuji, you can find the sleeping ancient weapon Pluton, and just a little bit further on, he then says that destroying the walls erected to protect Wano could set loose one of the ancient weapons. And honestly, with everything going on back then, Shanks arriving, Gear 5th, and so on and so forth, it didn't make as big an impression as it maybe should have, but now in retrospect, I'm kind of wondering why Oda chose these exact words to describe it. Like, first, Sukiyaki said it is sleeping, and that removing the borders would set it free, which to me kind of sounds a lot like Pluton might be something that's actually alive, like a living creature of some sort, and that at one point it was actually captured within the walls of Wano and sealed there. And interestingly enough, when Sukiyaki talks about Pluton, we see this massive cave entrance at the foot of Mount Fuji underwater. Now, if that should be the case, why did ancient Wano want to capture Pluton? And further, why did the samurai Kozuki Oden think it would be a safe and good idea to set it free after he discovered the truth of the Void Century? Perhaps Wano was keeping it safe from the world government all this time, something that I think we all assumed, and now that Luffy has finally awakened the Nika powers, Joy Boy is back and everything, he now thought that Luffy should be able to use it to free the world. Which sounds awesome, of course, no doubt about it, but we also have to remember that these ancient weapons already caused the world to be destroyed and flooded once, so who's to say that using them again now during another great war wouldn't make things even worse? Now, of course, we know that Luffy wouldn't do that intentionally, but it might just be a natural consequence of using the weapons to begin with. But now, if I had to guess, I do think that Luffy will somehow figure out a way to actually not make it worse, but reverse the flood that happened all those years ago. Maybe that also requires the use of the ancient weapons, only in a reverse way. And of course, all of this brings us back to one major question: who actually was Joy Boy? What did he want and what happened to him? And I think chapter 1115 has given us the clearest picture yet, because there are actually, I think, enough puzzle pieces here to start putting things together a little bit. Now, I've already mentioned that Joy Boy was someone born into the technologically, at that point already, very advanced ancient/giant kingdom. We know that he later awakened the Nika powers, just like Luffy, and became the quote-unquote first pirate. Now, the fact that he's called this most likely means that he must have broken some sort of law or rule. I mean, if I had to guess, it could be something like eating the Nika fruit, literally, or maybe it's just as simple as setting out to sea. Maybe that was something that was not very common or allowed back in the days because you could just travel by land. Whatever the case though, I'm guessing that Joy Boy became a pirate before the oceans rose and the continents were sunk, so we have to imagine that Joy Boy sailed around the world to visit different continents and different countries. Oh, yeah, and of course, another connection we can make here is that Joy Boy and his crew most likely also created the very famous pirate song, Binks Sake. And there are lyrics here to this song that I just kind of can't get out of my head. I mean, there has been a lot of theorizing around this song before, and the words about the sun and moon rising in a very positive sense has my mind racing with theories and ideas, and I might just do a whole breakdown of all of this involving the sun, the moon, Binks Sake in a whole separate video. Let me know if you'd like something like that down in the comments, please. That'd be probably a really fun video to make. But putting that aside for now, even though it kind of plays, okay, no time for all of this. Let's get to the real juicy ideas instead here, because there are two options here that I can see for Joy Boy's journey that are very different, but both very impactful. Okay, the first option is that Joy Boy and his crew were very likely a very similar type of freedom-loving crew as Luffy and the Straw Hats, and by meeting new friends and growing more powerful, by traveling all around the world, they became such a big threat to the world's already established governing system that people felt they needed to get rid of them. As we've mentioned before, perhaps Joy Boy inspired more people to be pirates as well, and this is what then actually led to the 20 kings fighting against him. But then if you also consider the fact that the ancient weapons very likely are far older than also the ancient kingdom itself, then it's possible that Joy Boy discovered the weapons during his travels. And of course, he probably wouldn't have known what they could actually do, but by finding these weapons in the first place, it could have been like a sort of Pandora's box type of situation where once he found these world-ending weapons, he could not stop the chaos that they started causing, even if he didn't really want them to, and this is what made the rest of the world ally against him. But of course, that is just option number one, where Joy Boy was truly similar to Luffy, a good dude, and in that he just wanted freedom and adventure and, you know, be nice to everyone, have the races unite, but he let loose something he couldn't control by accident. But it's actually the second option that I think is much more interesting in my opinion, because at some point we have to consider that Joy Boy failed to defeat the 20 Kings, so there must be some main difference between him and Luffy, right? I mean, the second option then I see for Joy Boy's journey is a lot more similar not to Luffy, but to Rock's D. Zebek, the so-called most dangerous pirate of 40 years ago, having also a close to unbeatable pirate crew. Because what we actually know from Rocks, he does share quite a lot of similar traits to Luffy. He's reckless, he can gather a immensely powerful crew, and he has very big dreams. But as far as we can tell, it's likely that Rocks was a lot more chaotic than Luffy as well, since his crew was never the same type of family that the Straw Hats were as well. And this actually could have been the case with Joy Boy too. Perhaps he did set out to be a pirate, found the ancient weapons, but then chose to use these ancient weapons repeatedly throughout his travels because he enjoyed having such immense power. And it's this that could have been what caused the sea levels to start rising and eventually the 20 kingdoms joined together in order to stop Joy Boy. Maybe that's what he was apologizing to the Mermaid Princess to, or maybe he was apologizing because he didn't manage to flood the entire planet, maybe to turn it into a paradise for the fishmen. Only the fishmen are left. Maybe Joy Boy was a fishman, who knows? And so the real question here is, what actually was the morality of Joy Boy? Is he like Luffy in that he does good because that's just his true nature? Or was he more of a chaotic, dangerous individual? Or is he someone who's trying to do the right thing, but ultimately got kind of in over their own head and eventually made the wrong choice or failed to make the right decision? And if you think that that's not very Oda-like, in fact, One Piece is kind of full of characters who are trying to do the right thing, but go about it in the completely wrong way, causing more suffering. For example, Big Mom wants to create a peaceful paradise where everyone from all races and all of the world can live together in safety, but she literally steals people's lifespan to create her tyrannical utopia. And there is Sanji, who refuses to hurt women even though he puts his own friends in danger as a result. There's also Robin, who wanted to protect her own friends by selfishly sacrificing herself, but did so by choosing not to trust those very same friends, in the end endangering them even more. And even in this very arc, Vegapunk clearly has very good intentions, is on the side of the good guys, but the technology he has created for the world government, mostly out of curiosity, has now been used to harm the world as well. And actually, to spin this another way, I wouldn't be surprised if we looked at this from the other perspective as well. Perhaps the 20 kings started out trying to save the world, but the government that they ended up creating and those who are in charge were eventually corrupted. Maybe Imu betrayed them and kind of turned the government into something it was never meant to be. And so was Joy Boy a similar character who had all the best intentions but went about it in the completely wrong way? And I mean, we can even look back to the most direct piece of evidence we have about Joy Boy, which is of course the One Piece itself. Because if you look back to chapter 967, which just gets more and more important somehow the longer time passes, we see that Roger is very clearly laughing about the tale that Joy Boy left for them to find on the islands. And to take it one step further, even Roger even wanted to live in that same time with Joy Boy, and this seriously makes me question what kind of tale did Joy Boy actually leave behind, and why did Roger want to live in that same time period? Now, perhaps Joy Boy shared the joys of discovering a new land while sailing the seas, or maybe it was just all about how everyone was more connected by land at that time, kind of more of a paradise type of world with advanced technology and everyone could travel, kind of like today, you know, you can travel anywhere you want. I mean, imagine Roger reading about flying on a plane from Tokyo to Los Angeles. I don't know, like for him that would probably be mind-blowing. And actually that would be very fitting considering that Vegapunk talks about how people today are so much separated by the dangerous oceans, or perhaps the story that Joy Boy left was more of a tragedy, and the tears that Roger and his crew are shedding are from both laughter and sadness, a kind of tragic laugh that they have here. I mean, whatever the case is, we do know that Joy Boy left something behind, something amazing that could be used at the proper time. Now, in the past, we have speculated that this might be ancient technology. It might be weapons that could be powered with the Eternal Flame using the Nika ability. Or perhaps Joy Boy left something in a sort of deep freeze state that is going to unfreeze very soon. Kind of, you know, like the giant freezer that we saw on Marijoa might be something that is gonna be relevant again later on. Or it might just straight up be a way to bring back the world of 800 years ago. And man, I'm just dying to know here. Like, I'm not even kidding. I don't think I've actually ever thought this hard about what the One Piece actually is and where it will be found. Like, there's so much other fantastic stuff to speculate and theorize about in One Piece. For some reason, I've never been like that eager to find out what the One Piece is, but now I really want to know. I want to like think about this even more going forward. Now, if you're familiar with any of my older theories, I'm still very much on board with the idea that Laugh Tale is maybe inside of an island whale, or it's just located underwater somewhere. That's, you know, of course, why Shanks and his crew don't have devil fruits, and hopefully we will get even more clues soon about that. And there is so much more that we can discuss from this chapter, but the thing I keep coming back to is, of course, Joy Boy's journey. Like, what was it like? What did he discover? And of course, who were these insanely powerful crewmates of his that were traveling alongside him, making him the biggest threat so that it took 20 kingdoms to take them down? Well, I think I might already know the answer to that last question, so if you want to see exactly who was very likely on Joy Boy's crew, then you can click this video right here. As always, Shanks, so much for watching. This one was just absolutely mind-blowing, and I hopefully see you in the next one. Thanks so much.